So first of all, thank you all for the opportunity to speak today, and another thank you for all the people who've been involved in organising this amazing event. I know it's a lot of work getting all of these things set up. So I thought I'd depart a little bit from the normally quite tech-heavy nature of the talks that we do at these conferences, and focus on something that's quite often overlooked in our sort of suite of developer toolkits, and that is soft skills. So in my career, I've been very fortunate. I've got to do a lot of different things. I've worked on some excellent engineering teams. I've run a few different teams. I've run teams anywhere from 6 people to over 60 at one point. And I thought it was worth going over a few of the little tips and things that I've picked up along the way. So the first one I talk about is to listen, don't reload. So what I mean by this is that a lot of the times when we're communicating with people, it's very easy to have a conversation, and rather than actively listening to what the other person is saying, you will spend your time thinking about what you're going to say next. All of these points, by the way, I'm bad at these. That's why I have them written down, and it's why normally if I have difficult conversations with team members or things like that, I will go and look at these things just to refresh them in my mind. So a lot of management training will talk about this word of active listening, but it genuinely is truly important to take your time, slow down, really listen to what the other person is saying, internalize and understand that, and then come up with what you're going to say next, because otherwise you're not having a conversation, you're just talking at each other. So the next one is that silence is golden. Really awkward, right? That's a very painful thing to do. That was a count of 10 in my head, really not a long amount of time. The reason I put this on this slide is there will be plenty of times when you're having conversations that you actually want the other person to think about what you're saying. So typically this can occur in things like coaching, doing interviews, which is something I'll touch on later, and when you're having quite serious conversations, career conversations, those kind of things. And a thing, again, I'm really bad at is trampling into that silence. And it's a really dangerous thing to do, because what you can do when the other person is silent, that is their thinking time. And you need to give them that time to think and come up with a really useful response to the question that you've posed them. If you interject in the middle of that, then they're spending their time thinking about the new thing that you've said, not the first thing that you said. So it's a really useful, simple thing, but let people have a bit of silence. You'll be surprised what answers you get out of people if you give them the time to think. So the next one, classic manager one. So happiness is a function of expectations. So this is a quote from a basketball pundit called David Jacoby that I listen to, that I quite like, and he talks about this all the time. Fairly straightforward one, but often gotten wrong, which is how you define or how you interact with people and set their expectations of what you're going to do will affect how they value your work. Trivial management example, if we're having a conversation and we say, right, we're going to deliver this project in 3 weeks. 4 weeks later, we deliver the project. Everyone thinks we're a week late. If we say it's going to take 5 weeks and we do it in 4 weeks, same work got done, but all of a sudden we're the heroes and we look great. Kind of leads on to the classic management tact of, ask your team how long something's going to take, double it, that's the time that you give back to the business. But it also applies to interactions with colleagues, with managers. So I think it's a real key thing for everybody is to check that you understand what the expectations other people have of you, and make sure that you can, that they're fair and that you can meet those expectations and have those conversations. So the next one I wanted to cover was about knowing what your audience want. And my analogy for this is watchmakers. So you can imagine that we as engineers are passionate about the intricacies of our watches, if you will. We love, playing around with the cogs and the springs, and we do, we have conferences about it and do talks on it. And we love getting into the minutiae of all of that. So be very aware about the work that you do and that the output of that, what is actually valued by the people that you're talking to. Again, it's important to have credibility technically with people. Like you can't completely gloss over all of the technical detail, but you'll be surprised about actually people find it refreshing from technologists if you can just talk in the language of what people want out of you rather than the tools you're using to get there. And the next one is talking about making sure people feel heard. Times I've messed this up in my career is things like leading technical discussions inside teams. Typically, anytime you get a group of people together, you will have different personalities at play. You will have people, probably like me, that talk a lot and are quite loud and more than happy to share opinions on things I know next to nothing about. And you will get other people who are much more considered, quiet. They want to listen to everyone else's point of view and then might come up with their own ideas. So it's really important, especially as you get into managing teams, to make sure that you're defending spaces for those people to contribute and for them to feel like their ideas have been heard and understood, even if you can't go along with it. Normally a trick I've done in the past is, and those who've worked on teams with me will have heard my manager hat, is that normally if we're having a technical debate and it gets mired, at some point there'll be different valuing of risks of a project, for example. At some point as a manager, you have to go, right, we've spoken about this, I'm going to put my hat on, I'm going to make the decision because we haven't come to a consensus as a group. And normally, at least I hope, that the people involved in that can respect that they've been heard, they've been understood, but we've decided to go in a different direction. The problem is if you just railroad people and just ignore their suggestions, then pretty soon they will shut down. They won't bother making suggestions anymore because what's the point? So it's an important thing to defend that space for people. Another place where I've seen this quite commonly, especially in the banking world, is in our interactions with our support teams. The number of times I've had it where support teams have come back and said, look, this is really causing us a problem, we're really struggling for this reason. But the development team, it's not important to them because they're not having to go and, click a link on a web page 3 times a day or whatever it is. And it gets, if a JIRA even gets raised at all, gets bumped down, nobody ever looks at it. So that's not making the support team feel heard and feel respected by the development team. So another important thing that, make sure people understand that their input is being understood. So the side thing I wanted to talk about as well was interviewing. So it occurred to me while I was putting these slides together that in a way you can look at interviewing as almost like coding katas, but for soft skills. It's a really good way for you to get some reps in what's the best way to put it? Well, it's a kind of fixed environment where you're meeting new people and you are trying to interact with them in a way that you want them to do certain things for you. So normally when I talk to people about interviewing, the most common reason why people don't volunteer to do interviews is for whatever reason they don't think they're good enough. So I'm here to say to everybody in this room, if you're in this room, you are definitely good enough to do interviews, and you will be surprised if you start doing them how good you are in a way. Even for people, like there are different age ranges in the room, not everyone's grey-haired like I am, but even for younger members of the team, you don't need to be a massive expert in a field to do an interview. You need to be able to talk to people and you need to be able to help them show their best side. It's not that scary to do interviews. It really isn't. The format that we have in Juxt is that we have normally an introductory chat with people, and then quite rapidly we go into a pairing test. We call it pairing, but obviously the candidate is doing most of the work. We already have a number of scenarios that have been written that are very easy to pick up. Just give the candidate a gist and then you kind of go through and pair on it and go through the solutions. So it's really not that bad. And also we typically always do interviews as pairs. So if you're not very experienced in interviewing, then by all means pair up with somebody who's done quite a few of them. You can be pretty silent in the first few, that's absolutely fine. But you'll find pretty quickly your curiosity will kick in and you'll start asking questions, and before long you'll be more than happy to run the interview all the way through. So one thing is, from a purely selfish point of view, is you'll probably find it's quite good for your self-image when you do these interviews. There are a range of talents available. Fortunately, especially, the people we get in, so our recruitment team at Juxt are amazing. The quality of candidates that we get in to talk to are so much higher than the candidates that I've had to interview when I do it as, helping out a client. So we already do a good job of getting people up there, to a decent level. But it will help you realize where you are at in the programming world, and that you will probably always have a good career to go to because you're good at what you do. But it's helpful sometimes to validate that by meeting people who perhaps aren't quite at that level. And then my last thing is that an important message for interviews, the times when I've been interviewed, both been interviewed by people and also been doing interviews, is it's important to understand that it's time for the candidate to shine. The bad interviews where I've been interviewed, I felt that the interviewer was just trying to tell me how smart they were. These are typically the interviews where somebody starts trying to pin you down on the minutiae of some JVM API or something like that really doesn't matter in the broad thrust of it. But just bear that in mind when you're doing interviews. It's not about the candidate thinking you're great. It's about the candidate having the space to, do their best work. So as part of that, try and everyone's been interviewed. It's a very stressful environment to be in if you're a candidate. So I tend to try and start with things like, tell me about the most recent thing that you worked on that made you excited or proud. Things like that. Nice, open, warm, friendly questions that get the candidate talking about something that they're excited about. Because the sooner you can calm them down, the sooner you can get them, in a good mood, the better a result you'll have when you then, if you do need to poke and prod a bit with them. So my final slide, the short, sweet one today, I thought I'd put the 5 points up there that I discussed earlier. So hopefully they're useful for people just as memory aids when you're going to go in and have difficult or different kinds of conversations. And just the last point really is that in this era of AI coming to take all of our jobs allegedly, I think soft skills are the skills that will never be replaced. And so they're a key part of our ability, relating to our colleagues, relating to our managers, relating to our friends. So thank you all very much, and I hope it's been interesting for you.